From the belly of a B-17 over the Leary Valley, Maj Evelyn Hart watches green flares spit up like lit fuses. Go, go now, before the weather seals the sky. The bombardier thumbs the toggle, bomb doors yawning over a crown of stone that has outlived sieges and plagues. On the net, clipped voices hold, Kiwi companies dug into Cassino's edge, Indian sappers by culverts, American guns keyed to lift on code words. The window is thin, weather closing, politics impatient, casualty lists swelling, and the risk sits in her headphones. Drop late, and you kill your own. The monastery stands aloof in winter light. The first stick walks the ridge, and the first irreversible consequence lands with a sound that empties the world. On a damp mapboard, the Gustav Line is a graphite wall across Italy's spine, knotted with Route 6, the only clean road to Rome. 3 pushes have died there already. Rapido crossings chewed by flood and fire, hill fights paying for meters with companies. Each stall feeds clocks in London and Washington, drains morale in tents where reports pile like wet coats. Lieutenant Colonel Harold Pierce, intelligence, lives inside grainy photos and rain-fuzzed intercepts, dragging clarity from blur. He taps the abbey silhouette with a pencil eraser, not believing it will blink, knowing something must. The first bombs fall through cold air that twists vapor trails into broken chalk. Hart counts seconds from release to impact, measuring them against corridors agreed with ground to avoid fratricide. Her ledger holds the math, 140 heavies, 1,400 tons, a timed peel to strip sight from stone. She promised only to remove suspicion. Men below have sold it as a door. The door opens with dust. By a low field wall slick with rain, Sergeant Tom Carver hunkers his section. Mud climbs their boots, cold as a hand. Behind, a Sherman idles like a sleeping animal. The ground starts to tremble with impact, and they count the shakes like a metronome. 1, 2, too many. Carver tells his men the road to Rome starts when the smoke lifts. He says it like a dare, because belief comes after moving. Pierce's photos say different things depending on the light. A line along a parapet could be laundry or camouflage. A fleck at a window could be a monk, a radio, a lensman's shadow. Field reports split. Forward observers swear of signal lights that blink before mortars. Patrols say Germans ring the hill but don't cross the sacred walls. An intercept insists the abbey remains a protected place, then later, do not cross the walls unless ordered. Pierce underlines until the paper dents, then hears engines overhead erase the question with blast. Inside the abbey, Sister Agnès counts rosaries and bread heels, moving between families and the abbot's worry. Rain has slicked the stones cold, and neutrality is a habit she believes will hold. White sheets ready as a language the guns can't misunderstand. Word arrives in whispers. Bombs. She writes a petition in careful Latin. We shelter all. We are no one's lookout. She'll wave cloth because language has limits. Hart reads petitions and casualty tables with the same pen. Bishops' signatures argue for history. Caskets argue for rubble. Weather cares for neither. Only weather moves men this month. A clean break opens, a window in a pissed-off sky, and she takes it, knowing the clock isn't only hers. Detonations sprout dust pillars that climb, bulb, and split. B-25s thread tighter runs, neat from altitude, sticks stepping across courtyards and colonnades as if on a rehearsal sheet. Below, New Zealanders duck as debris pelts like hail. A stone knocks Carver's helmet like a fist. He laughs a sound that isn't laughter and spits grit. At the Second Corps, a forward observer swears glints in the abbey track their misfortune. A tanker says the Germans don't need the sanctuary. They own the town and the spurs, mortars keyed to broken chimneys. Ground asks Hart if smoke will blind those eyes. She signs for smoke and thinks of screens that thin when a man stands to run. The bombardment walks the ridge. The roof sags like a ship, then releases a sigh that rolls down the valley. Before and after snap into place. Windows become mouths. The bell tower sways, kneels, folds. The sun shrinks to a white coin behind a dirty curtain. Monks shepherd families into cellars they've trusted for centuries. Sister Agnesi lists names under her breath, and her list is longer than her bread. The logic that kept tempers manageable was always fragile. A show of force shocks a defense. Even if empty of soldiers, rubble denies a view. Neutralizing prevents desecration. Lives saved in stones spent. Optics wrapped around the plan. We blind, we don't defile. As blast rolls over the hill, distinctions tan in the same heat. Words will strain under photographs. In town, medics chalk red crosses on cellar doors and turn half-shelled basements into triage. They haul men through sniper alleys, field phones snaked where radios choke in concrete. A bomb snaps wrong and shakes their shelter. One medic looks at the ceiling and thinks how ceilings now mean things they did not. Weather ignores schemes. Even as kneeboards hold run lists, low cloud breeds at the valley's edges. Afternoon threatens to become a gray room. Pierce pins yesterday's abbey next to what it's becoming and looks for absolution in contrast. The only thing that grants it is results, and results are late. Confusion clings wet to the decision. Photos catch figures that could be farmers, could be soldiers. Intercepts preach protected, then advise vantage near walls. Ground begs for the eye plucked. Liaison promises a blindfold around parapets, not a punch at the sanctuary. Promises travel poorly in rain. Cassino hears it as noise. Tiles skitter like fish scales. A Sherman tries to turn in a street that's become a chalk riverbed, track spinning, sparks spitting. Its turret jams on caught masonry. Infantry hug craters as if they were built for them. Smoke from the hill drifts down, smelling of lime, old books, and scorched cloth. Carver presses his sleeve to his mouth. The taste is plaster. Along the river, Indian engineers crouch under an old culvert and weigh charges for nests they'll pry loose later. Their officer wonders if the eyes that walk their positions have shut. Landmarks gone, mean maps lie. Corrections risk hitting ghosts. That's not difficulty, that's danger multiplied. The abbey had been a pocket of stillness. Now white flags start at its edges like cautious flowers. A line of monks, mothers, and children files out, bundles and jarred relics under cloth. Sister Agnese brings up the rear, ash-streaked, eyes on faces not sky. A gust snaps her white sheet like a shot, and she lowers it and moves because pausing here is a choice she won't make. Hart tracks all of it from a folding seat, then a cramped room where the phones stack like plates. She writes sorties, boxes, first impact reports. Coordinate a strike without a diplomatic firestorm. She can feel the heat anyway. Ground wants to move. Air wants to hit again before the sky shuts. Politics wants quiet. None will promise her the others. Pierce fields a chaplain who pleads for manuscripts older than divisions, and a forward observer who swears an MG-42 sings by the olive trees, arcs too clean for a hill run by conscience. He builds a picture just plausible enough for bombs to keep falling, knowing later someone will take the fragments and stack them into a charge sheet with his name. The town's sewers give way. Vaults collapse into pits wide enough to swallow a man and dust-skinned as ground. Runners vanish mid-stride, pulled into black water. A sergeant reaches into a hole and finds cold up to his shoulder and a field phone wire twisted around a boot. Radios sputter. Batteries vanish. Every word feels like a spider thread across a path. German paratroopers on the far shoulder stand with faces trained to show nothing. Lieutenant Franz Keller, who turns slopes into webs, feels the itch to move before the last bombs fall. Doctrine hums. When the enemy flattens landmarks, steal the new ones. When he remakes a landscape, learn it first. He sketches MG lanes with a gloved finger, each ending not in trenches, but in broken arches, offering slits and dry cover. He wants to be in those cracks before the dust lands. The barrage pauses to let dust fall, and Carver hears stone tick and water drip where it did not. Radios rasp, they bang the boxes, and glance at the tank like steel can't answer. A runner slides into their crater, gasping, relaying a near all clear and orders to be ready for lower streets. Carver nods, though his stomach tightens at the thought of alleys with no light and corners with teeth. Hart tells her pilot one last pass. Clouds coagulate where she needs holes. The bombardier nods, rinsed eyes on his sight. The last sticks walk past the crown into terraces. Scrub, error. Even precision is a promise made in perfect skies. Someone asks on net when smoke will lift. Someone else says, not today. Pierce thinks about ownership and sees a braid. Ground swearing about pinned companies and whispers of spotters on sacred stone. Air promising surges and friendly winds. Politics flexing calendars and headlines. He knows the inquiry will look for a single neck to fit a collar. There isn't one. On paper, the next move is simple. All clear, infantry push under artillery smoke. Tanks punch streets. Engineers clear lanes. The road to the hill becomes a corridor. Reality is bending. The shells registered last week will fall wrong with facades gone. Smoke will pool where you need sight and evaporate where exposure kills. Radios will go dumb inside concrete wells. Orders go anyway because the alternative is silence. When the bell tower quits, a gust claws the curtain, and for a pulse, the apse opens to a winter sky. Even men told not to look a look. It's not awe. It's confirmation the past has ended. The bombs keep to their own sequence. Awe is off schedule. Sister Agnese passes a camera crew that looks stunned by their own assignment. She doesn't speak. Words are soft objects now. The line stutters at an uneven patch. Far off, a mortar coughs. She weighs how sounds slide downhill now that roofs are gone and decides not to wait for a second thought. Hart's last view before turning home is of a crown dissolving into shadowed plateaus. She promised to keep air and ground in step, the floor ripped out. She lights a cigarette with hands that know fire isn't enemy, but twin. Windows closing, she sends. Ground passes it. Trenches look up. Carver squeezes his strap until the leather bites. A teletype spits Pierce a line. Perimeters intact, no entry. He almost laughs, like the enemy filed an affidavit. We were not here. It won't matter. The Abbey is now a place anyone can go whether or not anyone went before. He pockets the scrap because records warm cold decisions. The illusion of calm evaporates. Dust drifts into new rooms and makes rooms of void. Rain returns, beating on helmets and on men stepping into problems where names used to be. Heads look up, then down. Magazines get tapped, straps cinched. The question flips. Not can we take it, but what did we make? The smoke thins just enough to sketch the Abbey's bones against hard light, ribs of arch, teeth of wall, sockets where windows watched. A gust peels ash like a veil, and the apse shows open to winter and a shell's high, thin whine. In the hush between salvos, the mountain resettles. Fine rock hissing down slopes, men will climb because orders ride their backs. Pierce fans a stack of prints on a muddy car hood, figures near walls, an aerial with a tripod shadow, a window's glint. He taps a corner. He needs those spots to have been observers. He needs the calls to have been real. He wants the math to have paid down men he sent to die. He tells the Corps' chief pressure braided into necessity. Then monks and civilians file out under a sheet, faces soot dark, and his argument phrase. He knows his name is in the braid. On the far slope, Keller and his men move, dark flecks on churned limestone. Boots learn new holds. They don't seek intact rooms. They flow into blast-made cavities, slits where saints were framed yesterday. An MG-42 nests behind a broken rail. Its belt locks in. When it chatters, stone throws chips like sharp hail 200 meters down. Field phones snag on masonry razors. The men test lines with knives and tape. Keller memorizes new geometry in the time it takes dust to thin. In town, Carver's section noses into fractured facades off Route 6. Rooms sit open to the street, furniture iced with plaster. A Sherman shoulders toward a heap. Its track spins. The engine screams. The turret won't turn with a beam wedged under the skirt. The driver gooses. The hull bellies out. Cover that blocks the lane. Carver staggers his men along a gutter. The map is now rubble. The radio hisses and dies. He sends a runner, a boy with ropey neck and eyes too bright to find company. He counts seconds, knowing runners vanish when the street decides to. Hart leans in a signal truck, headset crooked, clouds sagging like wet canvas. The window for air is thin and mean. She underlines one box on a coordinate sheet. Smoke. If guns keep a veil, maybe they can forgive lost registers. She lobbies to hold it longer than doctrine, to cut lanes for men inside ruined alleys. Accountability rides her shoulders under the greatcoat. Each grease pencil choice sticks to her name tightly enough for lawyers later. Sister Agnese hustles families toward a cellar that breathes wine and damp, chalked as safe by a corporal who struggles to translate caution into 3 languages. She binds a child's arm with a torn hem. The corporal points at a collapsed door and says, "Listen for mortars." Some thump and then pop. She nods, adds that to her list, and shepherds them under a lintel that didn't exist yesterday. A full machine gun lane opens. Stone spalls from a column beside Carver, and the air turns white. A man shelters in a doorway that becomes splinters under tracer. Keller's angles come alive. Alleys blocked, courtyards interdicted, a bicycle placed as bait. 3 men snapped up trying to move it. The monastery has no roof. It has rifles, and every mouth bites. A flimsy pad arrives on Pierce's desk. Monks and civilians inside during the raids. German ring outside until now. That last phrase draws a chalk line. Until now. It both answers and condemns. He writes the sentence he knows will haunt him. Post-bomb occupation accelerated by rubble. He wants to slow the sky, let dust settle so ground eyes can parse, but the ceiling is a smear. Hart watches a B-25 turn away. The ceiling drops. She pushes fighter bombers to secondary targets and goes to work on smoke, dense enough to blind new slits without drowning infantry. The Met man says the breeze will toy with any screen, lifting where needed and sitting where it shouldn't. She signs a pattern knowing if it fails, it blindfolds her own. Carver's runner returns bandaged and water wet to the chest. Company's order arrives via another section. Take the post office. Hold. Wait for tanks that won't get there. Carver sees the trap in waiting, risk in moving. He splits the section, plants a team at a collapsed bakery covering the next street, swallows guilt fast. His plan: flare the turn, sprint under the next burst. He counts breaths between coughs of the MG. Keller radios, positions set, mortars keyed to new silhouettes, the app slip, the horseshoe void where the refectory fell. He tells his teams to learn echoes to adjust by ear when screens thicken. Rubble lets a pair with a spade make a platoon's trouble. A listening post goes into a dropped stair shaft. A boy nods and slips into black. The line goes quiet. Keller likes quiet for what it says about depth. Sister Agnese lays relic splinters on a crate like an altar. She tells the child to count between bursts. A Polish soldier with chalked cheeks leans in a doorway, listening to timing like a musician. She asks if the abbey is spared now it's broken. He shakes his head softly. Broken is useful. She files that under truths she hates. Pierce's intercepts jump languages and codes. He circles perimeter ring, draws an arrow to first bombs, then to a new term, occupation. He orders statements gathered from monks and townsfolk when they can be found, to nail down a narrative while dust still lies. Truth arrives late to fights. He files that to the shelf where truth keeps company with regret. Heart argues for a creeping lift. Batteries remind her landmarks have gone. Range tables are lies. She suggests dead reckoning curtains rolling uphill like a tide. She knows one short into a marked cellar turns later questions into knives. A resupply handcart loses a wheel into a drain pit. Two men kneel to haul and drop to shoulders. Carver throws a loop around a lamppost and lowers a man into cold black. The first thing out isn't a body, it's a chewed field phone wire, treasure, and snake. Every stationary second is a mortar adjustment. He hears the tubes cough, promising a slap in 3-2. Keller's mortars breathe. One round kisses a barber's lip and sends scissors and glass into a chalked cellar. He halts, re-angles. Don't waste rounds on fear. He hears a new sound, smoke shells burping in the valley. Sight dies, invisibility perfects. He shifts lanes to ambush a gap. A Sherman finally claws free and slews into a knot square. The commander pops to look, sees gray wall, ducks. Infantry presses the hull as a rolling bastion. Smoke shifts and clears. They see a toppled statue pointing like a sign. Carver taps 3 on armor. Creep. He can't tell if the monument was church or state. It's a problem either way. Hart hears the MG-42 buzz translated by walls into a gnaw. She orders the screen lifted in one sector, heavier in another. The wind thins exactly where her map says to bulk. She would court-martial weather if it were a person. Sister Agnese counts breaths between coughs, teaching the child. Creamy smoke sneaks under the door and overlays wine and dust. For a heartbeat, she thinks of incense and then hates herself. Neutrality feels small under falling stone. Friendly short? Pierce hears the phrase and his stomach knots. A lift meant to creep jumped because a landmark vanished. The correction came too late. He scratches a pen on his own skin to feel something real. He'd insisted on decisive. He wants daylight and gets a veil. Night crawls down early. Smoke merges with fog. Tracer stitches orange to nowhere. Carver opens a red-lensed torch, then shutters it. In the glow, he meets an Indian sepoy with a cut cheek, lost, eyes asking the river's way. Carver points, guessing, hoping the next hole isn't the river's mouth. Radios go from poor to useless. Runners become vanes and get cut. Keller switches to sound. Count boots on stone. Throw pebbles, read the echo, fire on breath. Night eats certainties and gives back shapes. He tells men to measure corridors with steps. A grenade judges faster than any colonel. A gust lifts the rag over the silhouette again. Roofless apse bites the sky. Some cross themselves. Some spit. Chalked crosses on cellars glow under lanterns. Sister Agnese lays her hand on a crate, cradling bones, and whispers that stone is a body to tend like any. The floor trembles with a barrage rolling uphill like surf and stops all thoughts not about getting flat. Hart confirms a dawn curtain, a slow creep. The Polish on the far shoulder will inherit this new architecture. She signs the message and sees her name as a folded paper waiting for another desk. She tries to imagine morning wind, and all she sees is dust. Carver tucks men into the ribs of a collapsed room, murmurs routes and passwords. He promises tea he doesn't have and saves 2 names in his head for after. He hears a voice say, bayonets. He doesn't know whose dawn that is. He layers another choice, sends someone for the missing runner. Under one he can't undo. Pierce compiles his report without absolution. Before bombs, ring, not footprint. After, rubble turned to ramparts. He writes the sentence that will sit in files like a live wire. Tomorrow may quiet it under triumph or carve it deeper into stone. He has no control over that. Then full night speaks in a new language. Each foot brings a whisper from gravel that used to be polished floors. Each breath pulls lime and paper. Hands find stone lips that hold or give into cold black. A man tests a stair that ends. Another slides into a void, no map marked. A radio voice dies mid-syllable. Tracer sews shut an opening. Another opens to the left. An MG coughs 3 times and shuts. A mortar answers with punctuation no one recognizes yet. Night falls. The rubble talks back with every step, and the only reply is where to put the next boot. In the town, water gathers where streets used to be, black mirrors swallowing lamp glow and tracer. Carver's boot slides into a cellar disguised as a puddle. He catches a window frame and snaps a field phone line with his weight. The runner behind him drops to his neck, whispering like a flare. Northeast, the MG-42 zips. Stone needles spray. The section flattens behind a Sherman with its track off a sprocket. Carver watches the screen drift into a different street. Where it leaves, a white scrap hangs in a window. Surrender, laundry, bait, he has to decide. On the slopes, Keller remaps by touch. Arched teeth open into stomach rooms. Slits where choirs sang now frame lanes. Crawlways link cellars of air. He plants a 2-man MG in a triangle of stone that frames the valley road, 200 meters of kill. He registers distances to 2 broken poplars standing like metronomes. He has no heavy guns. He doesn't need them yet. He tells a corporal, "Deny oxygen. Keep the mountain." In a crypt that isn't, Sister Agnese takes hands and moves a line through a tunnel born this morning. The reliquary feels like a sleeping child under her habit. She counts steps by feel until wind touches her face. Outside, the town flickers, and the lull is so still it feels staged. She pushes families into a hollow behind a toppled statue, flat on bellies, then a flare flowers over Cassino. The stillness was a hand on a door. The door opens to harder work. Hart spreads a damp map under a tilted torch. The lines don't match the hill anymore. She stacks requests: re-smoke the lower blocks, nick a mortar nest, light the back slope if the ceiling tears. Ground wants everything and none of it, and will blame the air for what it cannot haul. A captain on the net breathes into the microphone while shells walk his square. Hart glances up and wishes to push the clouds with her palm. She says it. If we can't see, tonight is not ours. Pierce sits by a hurricane lamp, paging through logs that shaped this. Pre-strike glints, chatter about spotters, blurred photos with suspicious shadows. Pleas from Rome and Canterbury muscled up next to casualty tables. Evidence was a ladder. Now it's a slope. A runner brings a note. Paratroopers in the ruins, lines laid, MGs cutting lanes. Pierce folds responsibility into his pocket where the paper goes and orders a listening post at the cemetery wall. He knows what the cost of listening can be. Carver hauls his soaked runner by the collar and finally sees a whole street. Collapsed facade making a slope toward a roof settled to waist height. Tankers work bars on a jam that won't come free. The street breathes mud and water and powder. Carver signals to move and waves to the tank to smoke right. The bloom comes late. A gust throws it into the wrong alley. A round drops 5 doors ahead. Stone splashes. He wonders who called it and whether they know what vein they cut. Keller hears his own mortar cycle, loader precise as a mason. The round kisses his mark near a stairway from the cemetery terrace. He angles a MG to rattle a thinning veil. A man flattens to a wall and doesn't move. The next burst walks the stones in front of him. He waits for the lurch forward. It comes. He decides respect belongs to economy. He sends a single grenade left and watches it arc like it could not do otherwise. Hart listens to tones in the radio. One pair off, voices tight, another on run-in, breath chopped by turbulence. She lifts her hand to guide wings she can't see. The first pair drops short. The ground tells her before instruments do. The second layers screen on the west better. If the cut is right, ground moves 10 yards. 10 yards can be a season. The rope tugs in Sister Agnes's hand. 2 turns, a gate that's now an empty frame. The valley air is metallic and near. She tells the woman with the bandaged child, "Lower gate, not safety." She gives a boy the rope to carry and makes purpose a shelter. Pierce leans into a jag in the cemetery wall and closes his eyes to sort sounds. MG syllables, mortar punctuation, bomber throat, the wet shuffle of men. He opens his eyes and sees the script revised mid-performance. He smooths the note about paratroopers and puts it back with his ID. "A braid did it," he will say if asked. Right now, all he does is point another runner forward. Carver reaches a corner that holds the world together. He touches stone warm from the day's violence and peeks through bricks. The cemetery wall is a stair. A muzzle flashes from a hole. He flattens as a pressure wave smacks. A bomb has just gone somewhere that isn't his problem to solve. His problem is 3 meters ahead. He barks, and the street takes them the way it takes anyone gutsy enough to ask. Keller feels the hill shrug as a backslope bomb finds a seam. Not blanket ruin, sabotage. Nerves cut. He checks his line and speaks a neighbor's name into the phone. Intimacy of defense threaded through wire. Hold until dawn, they say, as if dawn is a partner. He looks at the app's mouth, sky beyond, and whispers into stone. "Come then, we're not done." Hart's eyes water as smoke sneaks under the command truck door. She logs hits and misses, then tells a captain the screen opens, a thin lane now under the cemetery. Move before it slides. The answer is quiet and firm. Moving. She wants to say something human and doesn't. All she can hand him is time. Sister Agnese squeezes through the gate and chooses the ditch over the road. Mud to her knees, dignity cut to muscle. Machines and men speak on the road. The ditch just takes them. She pulls the rope. The line follows. The tunnel behind exhales. Pierce checks his watch. Dawn is a hint in the east. One more curtain, one more climb. He calls the Polish liaison and tells him to warm boots. February is going to demand May's work. He hesitates only long enough to listen for the runners he's already spent. Carver hears the artillery change tone. It's focused. Rain and chalk on his tongue. Whatever comes either cuts him a lane or packs him. His runner appears. Go. He nods, raises his arm, and the night leans. Keller feels the lens sharpen. He inches his team along a shadow, not a meter more. He senses Dawn's stretching fingers. What's coming is a signature in smoke. He tightens his glove and places his hand on shared metal. The pact holds until it breaks. Hart hears batteries confirm lifts, ground commit to a crawl, a pilot call fuel and turn home. She has will left and little else. In her head, the roofless apps eat sky and sits there whether they live to care. She says, "Last smoke on the town edge, make it count." The voice answering is tired and brave. Sister Agnese drops into the ditch and pulls a boy with her. Mud pulls back. She hears a speaking she can't translate. She holds the rope. For the next 3 steps, the world shrinks to that. Pierce keys the handset and says, "Execute." The dawn answers with steel. The map redraws overnight in grease pencil and doubt. Arrows climb the town's broken teeth toward a crown where certainty is stone. Polished troops tighten rosaries inside tunics and fix bayonets with cold hands. Artillery officers argue bearings with landmarks gone. The abbey's silhouette is a void swallowing the grid. Green flare, lift, red, repeat. Wind smears color. Orders hold. Take the height before noon, or the valley drowns in rain and delay. Hart lifts her pencil over the strike schedule. Tactical air can fly in this window if cloud behaves. She can claw at terraces just ahead of infantry, near point 593. But last night wrote a lesson in rubble. What explodes becomes armor. Ground requests smoke to blind the new sightlines. She approves, even as the weather officer warns of a curl out of the rapido that will smear their cloak. She signs. Ink dries into ownership. Pierce runs his finger down fresh decode, German chatter skirting the abbey by a constant ring. The symmetry betrays his earlier push. It tastes like iron. Engines warm in staggered chorus. There's no recalling what's already fallen. He writes it anyway. Occupation, post-strike. Underlined twice, as if underlines help. Keller tucks MG tripod legs into the mouth of a collapsed cell. The rubble knows his weight now. Mortars are keyed to chimneys and a fractured bell tower. Each fragment is a bracket in his book. Aircraft hum grows. He smiles a flinch. Bombs are carpenters who will hand him angles. Belts stack. Lanes below are measured to 250 meters. He hopes for half-blind. Carver squints through a wall slit and sees a sandbag mountain that's pews turned parapet. Steam and gun oil fog the cold. The field phone line they ran at midnight is already under sliding brick. He taps his runner and points at an absence where a spire was, a habit at war with empty air. When the curtain drops, we go. Straight, no clever. He doesn't trust clever today. Smoke lands low, blooms in olives, rolls uphill. Thick enough from command's tent. On the slope, it's teethy veils. Artillery lifts from ridges. Screens slide left, then back. Clear windows open where rifles glitter. Polished platoons move as ghosts, appear in kill lanes. Whistles fail, then boots smack wet stone, and a machine gun chews the air. Smoke buys seconds, sells direction. A Sherman bellies on a skull-sized rock and screams tracks into rubber smoke. The turret catches on slab. A mortar chips a fan of stone. The commander bangs the ring and calls for an engineer tank hung miles back by a leaning building. Infantry fold into a crater that sloshes tiles in rain. The machine is stuck. The plan waits and bleeds. Civilians still in lower shells hang white sheets and hope wind knows its job. A nun cradles relic bones against her chest like proximity matters. She argued with a German captain weeks ago. He promised they would move in only if the roof left. He meant it. Every crack in the apse confirms it. She whispers a psalm timed to fire and moves because motion is mercy. The barrage rolls and steps on its own feet. Without landmarks, guns guess. Corrections arrive smeared and late. A smoke line is a necklace instead of a wall. The manifold that still shows the abbey's outline like a ghost makes hands flinch at lifting too close. They lift early here, late there. In the seam, Keller opens lanes. A captain waves a hat, hoping color still carries. A Polish company finds a seam between disaster and trap. They crest a low wall and jam into a broken passage lined with altar-sized blocks. Grenades thud in bellies below. Others roll back from invisible angles. A priest kneels with a crucifix and a man spitting blood. He prays at a roofless church with a roofless man in his hands. The answer is not words. Hart tracks planes on a board that lies by the minute. A pilot calls wrong and corrects mid-breath. She gives them the box and the no-strike line as close to the crest as the ground permits. The mountain makes its own weather. A downdraft could ruin their math. The first dive stitches through cloud. Bombs look small. They aren't. The blast lifts a question nobody can afford to debate. Pierce reads a fragment. Paratroopers shifting to Cell A, West Apse. He doesn't have the codebook, but the photo in his head offers one. The apse is a black jaw. He wants to be there to fix error by proximity. He isn't allowed and can't trust what he'd see if he went. He writes, "Rubble-generated micropositions improve observation." He hates the phrase as soon as the ink dries. Keller's gun jams on belt 154. Stone dust finds every part. He slaps, clears, halves, bursts. A grenade drops into a crack and pops underfoot. The floor lifts, holds. He laughs, coughs powder, and steps into another room, the blast invented. He sends his runner to shift mortar, 20 left. The knot is there. The boy is swallowed by a job runners don't live long doing. Carver spots a shortcut. He takes it. The third man drops like he tripped. Then a mortar solves the math 4 seconds later. Exact. Carver drags him by webbing while the slope pulls. He curses himself and says it aloud. No detours. He doesn't trust his own mouth to believe him for 10 minutes. The hill knows, and it waits with traps. A medic chalks a red cross on a basement door and calls it a collection point. He sends runners and opens sleeves. Steam and quiet curses fill the room. Outside, he hesitates over a cigarette. A sniper's shot chips where flame would have been. He keeps the smoke unlit and the station still. Movement rings bells to men uphill. He straps another tourniquet and tells 2 men to expect a crawl. The wind isn't taking requests. An American colonel demands to know why the last pair didn't drop. Hart says, friendly push instead of nerves or ice. She plots a new run that skirts a line she suspects moved while she spoke. She thinks about the abbey, white sheets, promises, and stone that kept faith with nobody but gravity. That thought is for later. She orders another screen and writes. Screens thinning at critical spots. Indian sappers crouch on a farm wall and time a Bangalore under an iron gate that lies across a stair. They count MG reloads and lunge. The first pipe slides, shallow. 1 man goes flat as ground. He inches and shoves. The blast collapses the stair and reveals an older one beneath. The hill is layered with yesterday. They'll climb history to reach today. Then dust eats him and the job keeps moving. The chaplain in Pierce's corridor argues over collateral souls, a phrase that tastes like oil. Pierce drafts rumor management, how to speak of the abbey without using a word that damns. Necessity in a chain of pressure, he writes, and underlines chain. The links are living. He hears them strain. A Polish platoon plants a flag in a shallow and calls it held, while bullets butcher edges into fringe. They push under their own curtain, stepped up by gunners, half blind. They sing a soft net to catch each other. Words. Don't leave me. Keller holds fire for 3 heartbeats to let them close, not out of kindness. Proximity kills a machine's advantage and makes grenades truth. He times the burst. Carver's section falls into a hole not there at first light and claims it. Mud clutches ankles like argument. 1 man's boot is gone. 1 man's finger is somewhere he can't get back. The radio lies and the runner is a hope on legs. Staying invites mortars. Moving invites everything. He flips a coin with 2 run sides and doesn't look which one lands. On 3, he lies, and goes on 2. Hart's pilots report fuel shrinking. The window closes. She releases those who can't help and calls up a pair who won't make it for the lane bleeding now. She can't write a memo that fixes mountains. She circles sorties that didn't fly. Later, a pencil circle will look like restraint to one eye and abandonment to another. She signs for the wait. Keller feels a far shell find near enough. He pulls his team 2 rooms back. A 19-year-old's face looks like a photograph from before the war. Keller wants to tell him a story with patience in it. Dust makes breathing a job. Stories wait. Water, he says. The jug sits where yesterday ended. To reach it, the boy steps across a gap that widened while nobody was looking. Pierce reads the Polish line. Advancing under cover, contact at apps. Resistance strong, thinning. He passes it with a note. Observation degraded both sides. Micro-terrain nullifies mass. He can feel language settling again before the fight has finished. He closes the book and drops his eyes to the mud on his boots. A gust shreds the screen, and the crest shows. Arches shattered, chambers exposed, roofless nave. Both sides look, then the moment breaks. Poles surge. A paratrooper fires. A man falls on a threshold that meant protection yesterday. 2 terraces down, Carver sees a flag pitch and rise, then flatten, then rise again, as if answering an order he can't hear. On a battered radio, someone says, "We're in the abbey." Hart doesn't celebrate. Claims grow around need. She is careful with glory. Her call is simple. No strikes within the crown. Our men are there. Silence roars. Then someone says, "Copy." She keeps the headset on and listens to static that doesn't lie. Keller hears footsteps too close and empties his pistol into dark. He throws his last grenade into a shape that might be a door. The concussion kisses his teeth. A shout in another tongue arrives with grip and grit. They grapple and slip apart because someone else fires, because the mountain took the choice. Keller backs into a new angle and thinks the rubble he married protects and betrays by the same law. Carver and what's left of his section slide into a trench, running like a vein toward a wall. He remembers the abbey as a painting. Up close, it's a ledger. He tells them, heads down, hands ready. He hears singing and can't place whose. If they get through this, the road won't be a rumor. Polish II Corps moves with patience forged in other losses. They pay meters with men at a rate slow enough to imagine stopping, fast enough to make it matter. They crest into the roofless apse and plant a flag that traveled a long way to lift here. Keller orders a fallback to a line he will have to invent. Hart lets the headset hang for a breath. For an hour, words can't add anything. Pierce walks behind the push and steps through rooms that held relics and now hold rifles. Eyes meet his. He keeps his low. He sees a fresco hand raised in blessing in a corner. No one had time to rip. He leaves it. He collects words for interviews he'll take in iodine and dust, paratroopers saying they stayed out until the roof was gone and then went in, monks saying the world made a poor bargain, soldiers saying rubble fought like a recruit who doesn't get tired. He'll file a report that refuses to solve itself. Wind moves through the shattered church. Flags flake plaster where glass made saints. Men roll up colors and count dead in rooms never meant for blood. Trucks grind up Route 6. Ground is dirtier, clearer. Hart signs her last smoke order and faces the ledger. Nobody will credit small mercies she hid in maps. The only thing left is the next brief. Carver sits in mud a minute too long, then stands because staying invites artillery. The valley lies rinsed and sour. The road is a promise and a cost. He puts his palm on stone and feels the chill. He doesn't think about Rome. He thinks about socks and water and the corner left of the next corner. Then he lifts his hand and points. Keller returns to a blank page in a book meant for names and rights positions. Cell A relinquished when floor gone. New line along choir pit. Ammo low. He stops at spirits, leaves it empty. He hears steps in the next room and reaches for another belt without looking at the postcard in his head. Pierce files his report. He edits the line that matters 3 times and leaves it imperfect. Morning fights for warmth. The mountain exhales stone and cold. He steps outside and looks at a sky that isn't ready to be clear. The next runner waits with another piece of the same problem. By afternoon, a Polish flag flaps from a broken frame where stained glass once cut sunlight into color. The fabric looks too bright against stone that aged 100 years in a day. Dust and rain sour the wind. Tracers scratch a last few lines on nothing, then stop. Carver checks his men and nods at a notch in the wall leading up. He tastes lime and says, "We go on my mark," and the hill, still breathing, doesn't answer.